brands that chase trends, you can get a lot of success, but it's really hard to sustain.
Welcome to Top CMO. I'm chatting with Carolyn Dawkins, CMO at David Yurman.
What's the brand positioning? What is it that it stands for? What are the key pillars that really communicate what it stands for so consumers can see it in a very tangible way? So once you understand that framework, you can create within that framework. One of the things that is always really important for me and my teams is...
Carolyn, a brand like David Yurman, it's known for sort of on-trend, jewelry that a lot of people get excited about. How do you market or think about marketing coolness, trendiness, but in a way that can endure, in a way that isn't just the latest fad?
Yeah, I think a few things. I think the brands that we've seen the most success have been able to balance this idea of consistency and creativity. Consumers buy into brands that are consistent, something that they can trust in and something that is enduring. And so one of the things that is always really important for me and my teams is to really spend time decoding the brand. What's the brand positioning? What is it that it stands for? What are the key pillars that really communicate what it stands for so consumers can see it in a very tangible way? And what's the tone of voice? How do we turn up and talk to those in a really authentic way and really creating and understanding that red thread? Because that is the backbone that then allows you to create. So once you understand that framework, you can create within that framework and have so much success. I think one of the beautiful things about David Yurman that is so unique versus our competitive set is that we're a brand that was built out of this creative project between two exceptional artists. So they came together, inspired by each other, inspired by the design. And so this really strong backbone of artistry and high quality craftsmanship is something that is endured throughout the brand. So as you think about where we continue to evolve and where we continue to bring in freshness, it's in that creative space. It's very much around creativity. So we think about, how do we set up the next creative space for today's consumers, or how do we encourage the next generation of creators? And you'll see us continue to push more into this space, particularly as we get into, more towards the back half of this year and into 24. I think one of the other things that's really interesting too, and I think we're starting to see a bit of an evolution away, is I think there's a bit of a splinter between trends and relevance. And I think you're right, like brands that chase trends, you can get a lot of success, for particular periods, but it's really hard to sustain. And I think this idea of relevance is really understanding what your brand stands for and what the consumer's desirability is. And we spend a lot of time, we think about these two kind of concentric circles. What do I stand for? What's my consumer looking for? And it's kind of that where it meets in the middle is how you really build relevance. And I think that matters too when you have, beautifully, heritage built luxury brands, because you want something that's enduring as a consumer.
Well, and interesting to think about, because you often sort of, at least on this podcast, you get people coming in, and if they're going to divide a framework to think about marketing, some will come in and say, okay, here's the brand side and here's the performance marketing side. That's one way to look at it. What you're talking about, this idea of sort of consistency and creativity, is sort of like, what is in our core, what is in our wheelhouse, and then what do we have license to experiment with, still consistent with that, so we can do some things, but we're still related to that. So take us through, what is David Yurman? What is that consistency? What is it, if you look at a piece of jewelry and it has a distinctive look? I've had to, I've shopped David Yurman before, so I'm familiar personally. So it has kind of a sensibility to it. But what, for those of us who don't think about it all the time or all day, what are those kind of core pillars that give it consistency that can make it endure?
In our brand, yeah, for sure. I think we spoke a lot about creativity, and I think, a lot of brands, we've worked on a lot of brands, we've experienced a lot of brands. We often have to go really deep to mine for the stories around what makes this brand stand out. I think that was one of the most exciting things about coming to David Yurman, is that the story is there. It's these two exceptional artists that came together, and their creativity fueled a brand, and it has continued to fuel a brand, for 50 or more years. So I think you can see the artistry in the design that makes it classic yet unique. And it's this really unique balance of the two. It's differentiated, but it has so much, so many classic tendencies which make it endure. I think one of the second things behind the brand is, in a luxury space, we stand out as being, this idea of American relaxed luxury. And that's pretty rare in today's world. And I think that the backbone of our American relaxed luxury is this spirit of innovation. And that's so American. If you think about, it sits in how the product is designed. There is so much innovation in the design. There's innovation in terms of our breakthrough campaigns. If you think all the way back to Kate Moss, if you think about, we were the first mover or one of the first movers in the men's luxury jewelry category. We also, have so much innovation in terms of the materials that we select, and we craft fine jewelry out of highly innovative materials. I think that's a really unique tenet of the brand. I think we also have some recognizable design philosophies that really set us apart. And I think cable is one of those, particularly for our women's collection. I think one of the other tenets too, in a world where we are looking for things that have a little bit more, endurance, that things that we can believe in, this is a brand that's been led by generations of the Yurman family. And you can see that in their commitment to the product, commitment to the design and the creativity, but it also infuses the brand's commitment to philanthropy, given that the family are deeply invested in that space.
And how do you think then about kind of core categories that you're in versus emerging categories? I mean, you've been, I think, with the brand since the beginning of this year. You come from, kind of a long history in the cosmetic space. When you were onboarding yourself and you were thinking about what are our kind of like core areas, where the puck is now, the people we're trying to reach and the way we're trying to reach them, and also, I guess, a sports metaphor, where the puck is going, where we're trying to go to, new categories. How do you think about that in terms of who you're trying to reach?
There's a number of different ways that we look at it. I think the first part is it starts with the consumer. And I think one of the exciting things about our brand is we have such rich first-party data. And so we've been able to mine our customer data to truly understand these really unique segments of how they interact with jewelry and how they interact with our brand, how they interact seasonally, how they interact with different metals, different forms, etc. So our base of our understanding of our consumer is really rich. So we know how to personalize and talk to those consumers. I think one of the other things that we're doing a lot of as well is we're using external data to understand where consumers are moving towards. And I think in jewelry, there'll be some flex between the different segments, but it's very different too based on consumer psychographic segments. For some consumers, some segments will matter more than others at any given time. So in theory, a lot of the segments matter at the same weight. It's just they matter to different customers. So that's where you'll see more personalization of campaigns coming through. You talked a little bit before about thinking and splitting between brand and performance. And I think, we really think about it as one full cycle for a consumer. And we think about the agility. A lot of the brand building and the long-term building, it is happening at the brand end of the funnel, the top of the funnel, and then really building that relevance. That's that mid-tier, right? Like those are built out a little bit further out in advance. They're probably a little bit less agile, but it's the bottom of the funnel that's really kind of tying those two pieces together that you'll see much more agility from our business. And that's where if things are moving in search or if things are shifting in social, you'll see that bottom end of the funnel moves with so much agility based on what consumers are navigating towards.
Well, and the other thing I think is interesting, because a lot of CMOs from different verticals and different spaces listen to this podcast and might not think how you do in terms of collections, spring collection, fall collection, seasons. So how for a CMO who doesn't normally, I mean, they might have drive periods or they might have, top sales seasons, but they don't think of this notion of sort of collections that comes from the sort of the fashion luxury space. And I can see here, you have a spring 2023 collection. You've partnered with Scarlett Johansson. It's sculpted cable pieces that maybe speak to your core. How do you think about marketing in terms of these seasonal elements and specifically groupings, collections that might be useful for other CMOs to think about?
I think for us, we are product first in that regard. So what you're referencing are some exceptional collections that we know have really exceptional appeal to certain consumers. So you're talking about sculpted cable, which is one of our beautiful premier collections and something that we believe strongly in, we will at times bring forward a campaign that reflects that collection based on the season. But then we'll also put enduring campaigns behind it that are also timeless. So it's something that's unique about the brand. We have a balance of both seasonal campaigns and enduring campaigns. And you'll see they're based on different consumers because once again, based on our behavioral data, we can see how certain consumers navigate towards our brand at different moments.
Okay, so if I was going to paraphrase, you have, different product campaigns that are out there, but a seasonal campaign might be like the spotlight, the highlighter pen, the circle around what you really want to focus on that has a very specific target customer. Is that correct?
I think our focus it is more on these enduring campaigns, and you'll see more of that coming through from us. There are seasonal moments that are more like these little exclamation marks that really reflect news because we know some categories, some consumers in our brand are really driven by what's new. What's new because our brand is so steeped in creativity and bringing forward beautifully creative collections. And so we have a really strong selection of consumers who curate our brand, who have a collection of their own that has been curated through our brand's launches, which is exceptional and super unique. There are other consumers who are really driven by, tell me that this is an enduring product. Show me how long you've been invested in this product. Show me how long you've been invested in the design. Tell me about how classic this is. So you can see that's where the campaigns are coming together because they're talking to different sensibilities. And I think that's the beauty. We can see multiple different segments of our consumers, and that's why we have different campaigns.
Okay, well, and so then for your enduring campaigns, who is the target consumer on that? Like in terms of just demographics, who do you focus on?
In our enduring campaigns, generally, they have a much broader target because we can see that they touch a broader selection of our consumers. And that is why we invest in those enduring campaigns. So they will generally touch all of our segments in those campaigns.
Are you trying to appeal in the enduring campaign to, I don't know, a 40-something or 50-something woman, or are you trying to go to a 20 or 30-something woman? I'm just trying to get a general sense.
Yeah, I think the beauty of our brand is that those campaigns actually connect with a broad selection of consumers. I think one of the things that we know as marketers is that you can have talent that can skew towards a younger consumer and be just as effective at picking up a 40, 50 plus year old consumer because we know this is where, the macro kind of trends are happening. But our brand is very unique in terms of the breadth of customer base that we have.
You said the seasonal campaigns are more focused. So in this case, the fact that you kind of chose Scarlett Johansson for this, it's focused on sculpted cable. Who is the target for that? Just so we can get an understanding.
So sculpted cable is definitely targeted more towards a consumer who is very committed to having a classic, enduring collection. And what we've seen in recent years is that's really transcended demographics. In theory, we know, right, it does skew towards a certain age group based on their ability to purchase the product, so based on household income. But the appeal is consistently pulling very, very broad, which is very unique in terms of what's happening in the luxury space. We're finding that a product that is just as appealing to a 50-plus-year-old consumer is just as appealing to a consumer coming into the category 18, 20, et cetera. So that is why you can see that there are certain initiatives that focus on the brand, and then there are certain initiatives that focus on the consumer who does have that purchasing power.
And how do you think then about just if it's celebrity partnerships, if it's influencers, how does that impact what you do? I mean, I see here, I'm on the spring campaign. I mean, I of course see Scarlett Johansson. I think I see, if I recognize him correctly, Shawn Mendes, the singer there as well. And then I don't know, how do you think about those kind of celebrity influencers? And then I don't know what types of other influencers you use as well to communicate your message.
So I think, different influencers and different partners do different things across the funnel. And I think what we found with our tier one influencers or our top partners like a Scarlett Johansson or Shawn Mendes, they're exceptional at creating breakthrough creative. We've really found that, we spend, a significant portion of our media through digital, and some through, more static mediums. Because of their how recognized they are to their base, to the fan base that, really, really find them appealing, there is a stopping power, which is fantastic in advertising because obviously then the consumer will lean in and spend a little bit more time with the content, which is great at the top of the funnel. What we find though, as we start to move through the funnel, is different talent does a better job at mid-funnel and then lower funnel. Mid-funnel is where we find, content creators are performing obviously much better. They're able to really translate elements of the product to the consumer who's hungry for more information. What's the design intention behind it? How do I style it? How do I wear it seasonally, etc.? So they really do a great job at shifting some of the considerations and some of more of the familiarity around the product. And then you've got other influencers who are great in terms of really kind of shifting the needle in terms of adding to bag and shifting through to conversion. So that's why we think full funnel, because they're all doing something different. And then threading that together is what makes a campaign.
And how important is the influencer channel now for you versus traditional media advertising versus more like digital performance marketing? How important is it in your overall kind of marketing mix?
A couple of things, a couple of ways to think about that is, throughout COVID, we know that we saw big shifts in terms of how consumers behave and interact on media platforms. And I think what we found is social's become a full funnel platform unto itself, right? Like that's where consumers are predominantly going to discover new brands or new products. It's where consumers are going to learn more about, known brands or known products. And it has really become this enormous shopping mall. It is really shifting the needle in terms of driving conversion. So we think a lot about that. That has definitely shifted the way we build our campaigns and the way we build our partnerships. And if you think about what is consistently working on these platforms, particularly TikTok and to an extent on Instagram and, even across to YouTube Shorts, the creator is highly valuable in terms of driving engaging content. And I think you're seeing it's happening on handle and it's happening off handle as well. So there's kind of this new game happening. And so that is really important. I think the second part of the question is really about thinking once again through your customer segments. There are some consumers where certain advertising mediums and certain advertising type assets will still outperform. But there are other consumers that they'll need a mix of that, and then they'll need a mix of influencers. And I think it's really about, surrounding the consumer with a number of different messages that are all cohesive and connected, but they have a slightly different flavor to move that consumer either closer towards the brand or closer towards a purchase. And I think we know, in traditional advertising, the consumer needed around, 7 times exposure to an asset. And I think it's different now. They probably still need that amount of exposure, potentially even more, but each message almost has to move them on. And I think it's very hard to understand where they're at in the funnel. So they all have to be thoughtfully working together because it may all be happening on one media platform.
To get some broader context, as I mentioned, you had a long career. You started actually, it looks like in traditional CPG, but then really have worked in cosmetics. And you were 6 years at L'Oreal. You rose to vice president of marketing for Maybelline New York. What do you take from a brand like that, like a Maybelline New York or like L'Oreal, the parent company, that you're able to use now in the marketing you do for David Yurman?
Everything. I think you take everything from every brand. I've been so lucky to work across so many exceptional brands and work with so many, phenomenal leaders and teams. And I've been, blessed to have that experience. Listen, L'Oreal is a brilliant organization with such a slew of amazing brands. And I think it is very consumer centric. I think understanding the consumer at L'Oreal is key, but also innovation is critical. That is a business that moves fast. It is a business that takes calculated bets on where the consumer will move. And it's everything from products to marketing activations, to bets on digital. It was the organization that, made me so inspired and hungry to better understand the digital landscape. It's why I ultimately, went to Google. I think it gives you so much, push to really understand and evolve the expertise. I think, I was reading an article this morning in Fast Company, and it was saying that CMOs have, the most challenging experience of all at this point, because there's so many different hats that they need to wear now. It just continues to broaden. And I think we've read this same article or same headline, 20 or 30 times over. And I think it's amazing to keep building that skill set, because that is going to be the truth. We are going to continue to evolve, and marketing and consumers continue to evolve. And so that's kind of the thinking that I bring to David Yurman today. And I think what's beautiful about David Yurman is they're already committed to agility. They're already committed to transformation. And there's so much of that that's about to hit the market now. That's really exciting.
The last couple stops, you mentioned 4 years at Google, global director at Brand Lab. It sounds like the purpose of that was just your embrace and learning and exploring all things digital. Is that correct during your time there? Or what do you take from that experience that you use now?
Yeah, I think, that was a really deliberate choice. So Google was opening up what was called Brand Lab. And it was very much around saying to the top 200 brands that had JBPs with Google, give us your brand challenge and we'll solve your brand challenge, whilst also ensuring that you better understand how to use our platforms, whether it was search, whether it was YouTube, and threading it all together. So, you'd be working with, Mercedes-Benz one day, to P&G the next, to GSK the next, etc. They would give you a really critical challenge. So our team we had brilliant insights leads. We had, data analysts, data scientists. We had media strategists, creative strategists, measurement strategists, and then we had product experts, so Google product experts in our team. And so we would have, 4 weeks to solve this challenge and kind of take it back to the C-suite as some of their, senior leads around, listen, this is the strategic framework around how to solve the challenge. And here's how to bring it to life throughout our platforms. And it was a really successful team. It ended up, expanding across the globe. So, New York, San Francisco, London, Dubai, Paris. I'm leaving a lot out, Sao Paulo, Tokyo. So it was a great experience of decoding the digital platforms, building out my first time building out a data science and a data analytics team that was able to mine Google's data, which is amazing. All the while, really, really learning that space.
After sort of a brief stint in sort of pharmaceutical marketing, it looks like, then your final stop before where you are now at Estee Lauder, specifically you were global chief marketing officer for the Clinique brand. After the L'Oreal experience, what did you kind of take from Estee Lauder that you now use as well?
I think the Clinique experience was really unique as well, in the fact that it is such a tenured brand and has so much rich equity that, kind of coming back to your first question, needed to be constantly evolved to pick up that next generation of consumers. I think that space was competitive when I worked at L'Oreal. It was hyper competitive by the time I got to Lauder. And I think that the volume of brands that now sat in the category, the hyper fragmentation of the category and of the consumer, meant that the marketing needed to be just so much more sophisticated. And it was this really unique balance of decoding the equity, because it was a brand that had so much heritage and had so many, unique individuals touch that heritage, but picking that up in terms of what really mattered, but then finding the right spaces to play and provocate and almost shock the consumer to re-engage with the brand. And I think you could see, a number of different initiatives that myself and the team led. It ended up having, its strongest sales year. It was named, number one brand in the US in 22. So, proof that the method works, but very exciting. And the brand's still got, obviously, a long way to go to finish that journey.
That brings us to our final question, which is, when I look at your career, and there's kind of maybe a couple leaps that you had. One from you started in the CPG space, then you kind of leap into to more of the cosmetic space. The second one, you sort of embrace digital. You go to Google and you learn all things there. And then third, you sort of come back to the cosmetic space, but then sort of extend it into more a related industry like luxury and jewelry at David Yurman. So, given all of that, what is your advice for others who are future CMOs? Maybe they're 5 years away. Maybe there's something else, and you had those sort of kind of distinct moments. I don't know if those were strategic and planned, and you had it mapped out, since your college days, or you were serendipitously looking for opportunities and expanding your horizons. What is your advice given your career trajectory for others?
Yeah, I think one of the key things I'm focused on is just being a constant learner. I think we will continue to need new skill sets. I mean, obviously, 1 minute we're all obsessed with metaverse, next minute it's AI. Like, we don't know what's to come. So you have to be constantly learning. And so whether that is, being a voracious consumer of as much information as you possibly can, or if it is about really going in and deeply building out skill sets that will be important, I think making those decisions and making those leaps at the right point is super important. It's super important because I think it gives you the skill set and that the toolkit that you'll constantly go back to. And it'll obviously make you a better leader for your teams. I think diversity of experience is amazing. Have different leaders, be exposed to different leaders, different thinking, different strategic frameworks, different cultures. I've worked in a number of different countries throughout my career, a number of different organizational cultures. I think it's great to be able to, see so many of those and to be able to flex and be fluid throughout those. I think identifying then through those cultures what it is that you want to bring forward. So how do you want to, build your leadership brand is very key. And I think one of the key things that I would take forward as well is, because you've seen throughout that experience, really use all of those adjacent categories to help frame up new brand problems or new brand opportunities or new brand solutions. My team will tell you I'm constantly tapping back into challenges that we had on Clinique or Maybelline, or, it doesn't matter, all the way back to, when I was on P&G or different things that I saw for different brands at Google. Being able to tap into adjacent worlds to identify like us problems or like us opportunities or like us solutions has also helped create so much innovation, because oftentimes the solutions, they're not actually in your category, or the inspiration or the creativity, it's not inside your own category, it's in adjacent categories. And when we've kind of thought like that, that's when we've been able to shift the needle.
And also, some of it too, to piggyback on what you're saying, is like all of us are experience collectors. We're collecting experiences, but if we can collect more diverse experiences, and this is where it's a little bit funny given what's on trend now in terms of generative AI. A way to think about generative AI is just it's pattern recognition from a lot of collected experience. That's what the technology does. And if we can do that in our own lives, in our own careers, collect a lot of experience and recognize patterns out, then you're in that meeting and you're facing a challenge or a problem. You're like, wait, at Clinique, there was this. Wait, at Kellogg's, which you did earlier in your career, there was this. And you're able to pull from a richer data set of your own experience, much in the same way that technology tools do so now.
Yeah, no, I love that idea of looking for patterns. You're right. And I think, that's another piece that I use a lot of. When you are presented with a problem, it's really about how do you curate the right amount of information and how do you start to, I talk a lot about triangulating the data. So a data source is never an insight. It's about how do you start to, whether it's stacking the data, if we're kind of being that sophisticated, or it really is just triangulating different data sources to kind of get to, hey, here are some of the key ahas that are sitting behind this. You're right, like constantly looking for patterns. It's also what helps us see what's coming, right? Like we kind of look for the little threads, like what's the oil on the rag that there's enough to sniff out, and how do you start to test into that for sure.
Carolyn Dawkins, a CMO at David Yurman, and you've had an interesting career in a lot of spaces, and interesting to chat with you, and best wishes for continued success.
Thank you so much for having me today, Ben. It was great to spend some time with you. I really appreciate it.
This was brought to you by Top Thought Leader. Find out more at topthoughtleader.com.